Hello,
Ooh.
welcome to Irish Passport.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Irish Passport.
I'm Tim McInerney.
I'm Naomi O'Leary.
We're friends.
Okay, well to Naomi.
Anwar Fad Tim.
This is your passport to Irish culture, history and politics.
Uh-huh.
I'm recording.
One,
2,
3. Okay.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Irish Passport podcast, where today we are making a first of possibly multiple episodes on Oscar Wilde.
There is so much to say about this figure. Giant of literature, giant of Irish history, giant in social history. We've got pages and pages of notes. So we're just going to see where this takes us, and we don't know how many episodes it's going to be next.
It's true.
Yet. This is the first one.
Naomi and I both set about preparing for this, and then we came back to each other saying both of us just had way too much stuff.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, we'll make more than one episode, but we just got obsessed with this. This is so interesting. Everyone is vaguely aware of the story of Oscar Wilde and the trial and the literature and the literary genius, etc. But there's so much more, actually, that's really, really nuanced and really detailed beneath this story that, I just can't wait to get into. So in this episode, we're going to focus on Oscar's life in Ireland first. It's part that's not talked about that much because, of course, in histories of Oscar Wilde, we have this all-encompassing event, which is, of course, his famous trial. Mm-hmm. And his life in Ireland gets overlooked a little bit. It's usually kind of skipped over a little bit. We want to focus on that mostly in this episode before we get on to later things in his life.
That's so important for understanding who he was and his works.
So, Naomi, where do we start?
Well, let's start at the beginning. He was born on Weston Row, central Dublin.
Yes.
Oscar Wilde, he was christened Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde. And there is an interesting detail there referring back to a previous episode.
Go on.
The O'Flaherty part, do you know what that's about?
Well, the fearsome O'Flahertys of Galway, is it?
The very same.
No, I was wondering about that.
Yes, he's named after a grandmother who was such an O'Flaherty.
No way.
The very ones of the famous inscription in Galway saying, God save us from the O'Flahertys. That's the O'Flaherty in Oscar Wilde's name.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, considering his mother, who we'll get to in a minute. I can't wait to.
Yeah.
Because these names, O'Flaherty, Fingal,
Yeah.
these aren't surnames, not like a double-barreled name. These are given middle names. They're like, you know, the way like in America people are called like Mackenzie or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a first name kind of, but which is very unusual, really.
His mother described it as being something like a, wind-blown Irish name or something like that. She said he was going to be called Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty.
Fingal O'Flaherty. Yeah. Like his brothers and sisters also have long names, but it's like Jane, Elizabeth and stuff. Right? Yeah. I don't know what their names are, but Willie is his brother, right?
Yeah, he had a brother, that was his dad's name as well.
Yes.
He had a younger sister called Isola, and he had several half-siblings, I think 3 as well. 2 sisters and a brother, I think.
Yes, we have to we're getting into them. Yeah. Wait, hold on, before we move on from the name.
Yeah.
Do you know where the Wilde comes from?
A Dutchman.
It's Dutch, it's Wilde.
Wilde, yeah. So this is really interesting. This tells us about who these people are.
Yeah.
They're a kind of mongrel crowd. He's got ancestors from all over the place. They are a middle-class Protestant family living in Dublin. And ancestors on different sides don't have particularly elevated status. They're very far from aristocrats. It's like kind of middle class all the way down, like humble-ish.
Yeah.
But they are talented. They're a new kind of intellectual force kind of thing in society, and they become the centre of the Dublin social scene, his parents and his family when he was growing up, through talent, really.
Yeah. I think it might be interesting to kind of situate his class because it is quite interesting. So listeners who heard our recent episode on the Guinnesses, you can kind of maybe situate them in relation to that. So the Guinnesses were also a Protestant family. They were also middle class, but lower on the scale than these guys.
Yeah.
So the Guinnesses were business people, successful business people. But you might remember how we talked about how the Guinnesses, being successful business people, were able to be incredibly powerful because of just being Protestants in Ireland in the 18th century, basically. Mm-hmm. The Wildes and the greater family, they're higher up on the scale than that. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're professionals, they've been to university, they're intellectuals, like you said. It's not necessarily a case that they are able to kind of zoom to the top of society because of being Protestants. It's more that there's actually nothing really in Ireland above them. At this point. So we're talking about the 19th century. Oscar Wilde was born in 1854. That's about 30 years after the Act of Union. So more or less all of the aristocrats and all the people who have power in politics or in the government, who have like big national power, they've left, right? So
They've gone to Britain.
They've gone to London. Yeah, because if you want to be in the House of Commons or have even just be influential in the House of Commons, let's say, you've got to be in London.
There's no parliament in Ireland anymore.
There's no parliament in Ireland anymore. I mean, there used to be, right? So all of these big mansions, like in Marion Square where Wilde's family lived, these mansions that used to be inhabited by aristocrats, now they're inhabited by people like the Wildes.
Okay.
And the social scene, like the high society in Dublin is people like them.
Okay.
So you just have to keep that in mind, because in London they would be considered kind of middle brow, but in Ireland they are really the top of the pile.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Will we discuss his parents?
Let's start. Which one? No, we start with the father.
Okay, we'll start with the dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
William.
Famous surgeon.
Famous surgeon.
Yeah.
Created his own hospital. Mm-hmm. The very first eye and ear hospital in the world.
Oh, the world.
The world.
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
It was a new concept. He created the concept of an eye and ear hospital.
There's still loads of procedures called like Wilde's this or Wilde's that that are used in like ear and eye medicine. He was really pioneering.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. He was knighted for it.
Yeah.
For his research. So he became Sir William Wilde. And it's still there. The hospital that he founded. It's on Adelaide Road in Dublin, near the canal, the South Canal. Is that the Royal Canal or the Grand Canal? I can never forget.
I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. Around Portobello in Dublin. And it's called, I was actually surprised, it was renamed the Royal Victoria Hospital. It's still called the Royal Victoria Hospital.
Really?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I would have kind of thought the Royal Hospital would have survived, or the Victoria Hospital, but the two, Royal Victoria. Like, how did that keep going for the last 100 years? But anyway. Right. Yeah, so he got knighted for that. Famous surgeon. We're going to come back to him in a hospital. But I want to talk about him a little bit as a gentleman archaeologist.
Yeah, he was one of these guys with like ranging interests. So like I think he discovered the first like lake dwelling and documented the first lake dwelling in Ireland. He had all sorts of interests, and he was more than an amateur. You know, he wrote books about them. Like his research was really well respected. It's impressive. He was kind of an amateur archaeologist, or a self-made archaeologist on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of almost created what he became an expert in, like the field. So he wrote the catalogue for the Royal Irish Academy's museum. He was part of basically forming what archaeology even is, basically. So yes, he found the first chronog.
Chronog, yeah,
that's what he was finding.
Right.
Which is really weird. This is so interesting that chronogs, so we talked about chronogs in a few different episodes, but especially in our episodes on the lost world of Gaelic Ireland. So these are lake dwellings. They're a little bit like wraths that we talked about before. They're all over Ireland. They were used between the prehistoric period right up until the 18th century. So Gaelic Irish people were living in these little lake dwellings, kind of defensive lake dwellings, right up until the 18th century, which means right up until about 100 years before William Wilde refound them, which I just find that's so interesting.
Okay, so as archaeology, it's actually not that old what they're digging up at that point.
Not necessarily.
Wow.
I mean, the thing is that what surprises me is that the memory of chronogs basically vanished from the face of the earth.
Wow.
Everyone forgot they existed. Because these things, when they grow over in a lake, you just would never know that they're artificial. They look like islands. You never, would think about it. Sometimes they sink. So people actually didn't know they were there. Now, at the beginning of the 19th century, some Scottish archaeologists found some in Scotland. And they're like, what the hell are these? It seems like these ancient peoples of Scotland were living in lakes. But William Wilde was like, hold on, that's a Gaelic part of Scotland. So if there were these structures in Gaelic Scotland, they're probably here too, in Gaelic Ireland. And he goes off and he starts looking at maps and he finds them. And I think we can't underestimate how much this influenced him, because what's really cool about this is that, he finds the first one, realizes that this thing exists in the first place, then starts seeing them everywhere. And then he starts digging, and when he digs inside them, he finds like gold and silver and swords and pottery and and that's all the stuff that he catalogues in the museum catalogue, right? Wow. So for him, it must have been a bit like, discovering Tutankhamun's tomb,
It's discovering a lost world.
Yeah.
Wow.
That had been forgotten, by the world entirely.
Probably not unrelated that the Wildes are a nationalist family. He had nationalist politics as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. And part of this archaeology thing involved them going to the west of Ireland a lot. So they have two houses. The Wildes had two houses out in Connacht. So they had one near Cong, which is called Mortura House, which was kind of a small country pile. And then they had a little hunting lodge out on Loch Fee, which is near Renville in Galway. And it's I think it might be a Cronach.
It's a Cronach?
I mean, there's another little island beside it that I think, well, maybe that's a Cronach, actually. It's like a half island. It looks a bit artificial.
Okay.
Listen, I didn't look into it, but it's very Cronach vibe.
Okay.
And I know that he went out looking for Cronachs out there. So he would go like Cronach hunting on his time off, in these lakes and stuff that were out there. What's interesting about that is, going out to Connacht, spending half the year there, by the way, him and the family, including Oscar, they spent half the year there. They would have been surrounded by Irish speakers that whole time. I mean, this was a completely Irish-speaking province at that point, basically. So it's, it's interesting, to put it in that perspective.
Yeah, so interesting to imagine the young Oscar in that environment. Fascinating.
Also, if we think about the year, the 1850s, 1860s.
Right.
So, again, a callback to our recent Guinness episode, we talked about the Guinnesses going out to their country pile in Connemara, also near Cong, actually, Ashford Castle. They used to go out there and be shocked by the devastation of the famine. The Wildes must have seen the same thing. So they were going out to the worst affected areas of the famine. That's where their houses were. And they were nationalists. We're going to come back to that when we talk about Jane Wilde.
So this is a post-devastated landscape.
I mean, immediately post. If we think Wilde was born in 1854, that's 2 years after the end of the famine.
Wow. So you're going to have these empty villages that only just emptied. They're not going to look like the ruins that we know. They're ghost villages emptied out by hunger, starvation and emigration. Yeah. And that would be the landscape they were travelling through to get to where they were, and huge mass famine graveyards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're right in the thick of it. Both of their houses are right in the thick of the worst affected areas of the famine. Wow. Yeah, so we need to kind of think about it that way too.
Yeah.
Right.
Later on, folklore and fairy tales are going to become very important to Oscar Wilde. Is this a source that he begins to draw from at this time? Is he exposed to Irish folklore, the oral tradition in those places?
He definitely was.
Yeah.
So William Wilde would go around hunting for Cronachs, as you do, but he would also go around hunting for folklore. So if you think about all these people who were collecting stories, collecting songs, it was a kind of gentleman activity to do for people at this point. A kind of ethnology, I suppose, like ethnographic kind of studies. So he would go and talk to people in cabins, old people, and tell me the story about that field over there, or tell me the story about the local ghost or whatever. And he wrote all these stories down, histories as well, kind of the histories that people had in the regions. His most famous book was about Loch Corrib, and it was a huge seller. This guy was very well known. So, like, his family were an engine of this kind of Gaelic revival, if you can put it that way, in the 1890s.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the complexity as well of his character. Okay, so
William.
Interestingly, William Wilde, this is the dad, he had 3 other children before his marriage, right?
Yes.
So Oscar Wilde had 3 half siblings. We don't really know very much about the circumstances of their birth. I don't think it's known who their mother was.
Nobody knows what the mothers are.
But William Wilde had them brought up, I think, by his brother or something.
By his relatives, yeah.
So, and they used to all holiday together, so it was kind of blended family.
It's so strange. So he wouldn't tell anyone who their mothers were.
Yeah.
But so it's 2 girls and 1 boy.
Yeah.
The 2 girls have the same mother. The boy has a different mother.
Okay.
He must have told them that, because they don't know who the mothers were, but they do know that
They're
2 of them
different.
have the same one, and yeah.
The 2 daughters came to a very tragic end. One of them went on fire at like a dance at a ball, and then the other one went on fire and they both died. It's terribly sad.
It's awful.
Yeah, it would have been these things with, candles everywhere and these huge dresses, and really tragic.
This was actually really common. That happened all the time. In mid-19th century, those really wide crinoline dresses were in fashion. And there were fireplaces and candles everywhere. But more importantly, like, the crinoline dresses were often made of super flammable materials. So
they're just a huge fire hazard.
They just, and once they catch fire, they take up. It's not like your dress is on fire, oh no, put it out. It's like that all of your dress just takes off in flames.
And you can't get it off.
You're done. Yeah, horrific.
Nightmare.
Both of the sisters died. The stories vary. One of the stories says that one of the sisters jumped on the other sister and tried to put her out. Another one says that she tried to, like, roll her in the snow outside. But whatever happened, both of them caught on fire from each other, and they both. Well, William was really upset about this. He found this like a big tragedy. So he did love his children. Yeah, his previous children. I mean, and I suppose he did bring them up. He spent a lot of money on them. He brought them up in a genteel manner,
Yeah.
not quite as genteel as his old family, but
It's almost got a little bit Gaelic, kind of. Yeah, I saw it referred to somewhere that this was a time of a little bit more social permissiveness, at least in those circles. The kind of stern Victorian morality wasn't like reigning, at least at that time, so much, or that, you know, at the time he was coming from. I think he made a monument to the two daughters in the garden, and also remembered on that monument was Isula, who only lived until about, I think, 8. Sadly, she died from illness. Oscar Wilde wrote an early poem about her, which is really beautiful. Is so sad. About like losing his little sister. He would have been like a few years older than her.
Yeah, the whole thing is very interesting. Now, listen, I kind of hate when people read into literary works about like things that happen to the author, but you can't not see this here because like in loads of Oscar Wilde's plays you have like children who don't know who their mothers are, or like characters who don't know who their fathers are or mothers are, and it's kind of an almost comical thing. It's kind of almost a farcical kind of vaudevillian setup, and it's very similar like a lot of the time to the situation that he actually grew up in, which made me think that actually if you did grow up in that situation and you were like, yeah, my dad has 3 other kids, but he knows who their mothers are, but refuses to tell anyone who they are. I mean, you would think that's weird, isn't it? I mean,
who's it going to turn out to be? Is it going to be a big punchline? Yeah.
You would think about that a lot, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
And,
so
later on in life, so I'd be like, what was that about?
I guess among his stock characters for reference, this whole thing of illegitimate children and people of obscure and unknown parentage is the thing from the start. Yeah.
Yes. So we have the main character in The Importance of Being Earnest, who's left in a handbag at a train station.
Yeah, for example.
And Lady Windermere, also in Lady Windermere Fan, her mother abandoned her as a child, but also her mother comes into the play, but doesn't take her back. You know, she doesn't acknowledge her ever. They're both happy like that.
Okay.
And they both live happy lives, never being, you know, acknowledging being mother and daughter, which is just, you know, like you can't not see an echo in that, surely. Anyway.
It's interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Let's move on because there's more scandal coming for Willie. Yeah.
Okay, so among the Dublin gossip about William Wilde, Sir William Wilde, was that he was dirty. That was this gossip that there was about him.
What, he was like smelly? That
he was dirty. There was like apparently a Dublin quip about him, like, because he was famous. He was a famous doctor, and it was like, why is Dr. Wilde's hand dirty or a finger dirty or something? And it was because he scratched himself. Like, this was a nasty gossip that there was about him at the time. God. And weirdly enough, it used to be about Oscar too when he first started school. So that's just a weird thing. I think this was possibly a way of talking about that he was maybe a bit of a philanderer. Okay. Which we can possibly read into by his various children, but also in what we're about to talk about, which is the accusation against him by a patient.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So this is a female patient named Mary Travers.
Yes.
And she went handing out flyers and cartoons, like illustrated flyers, in public, saying that he had sexually assaulted her, that he had used chloroform to pass her out and sexually assaulted her. Yeah.
She believed this has happened. She didn't make the accusation until years later. It's a real kind of Me Too antecedent thing. She was really convinced and embittered about this, and she would write letters to newspapers, like she wouldn't give it up. There was a libel case about it, and do you want to take it up?
Well, I mean, that's the interesting part, right? Because it's this weird foreshadowing of Oscar Wilde's own trial, like decades later. It's William Wilde's wife, who we're getting there. We'll get onto her. William Wilde's wife,
Oscar's mother,
took exception to Mary Travers, and she decided that Mary Travers was doing this to extort money from their family.
Okay.
Which was a thing that people did. Now, like, both these things happened. We have to remember we're in a world where, like, there's this social class of people, servants who are very vulnerable in the employ of very powerful people, and if they get fired, they're kind of out in the street and, you know, they have nothing to do. So they get sexually assaulted a lot. Mary Travers isn't a servant, but we have this kind of world where we have, like, just this completely institutionalized sexual assault basically on a class basis, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So that's the kind of world we're in. But in that world as well, the servants and the people who are being sexually assaulted did extort money from the people who were doing it, because that was the only power that they had. I would too if I was in their situation.
Right.
Like, you don't really have recourse to the law in a way that's like reasonably going to listen to you or help you. You don't have any money to spend on a court case anyway. So who knows?
They look for payouts.
They look
also
for payouts.
because they're probably need it. They're in financial difficulty.
So this would have been feasible, let's say, for Jane Wilde. Jane Wilde was convinced of this anyway. So she writes this letter to Mary Travers' father saying, your daughter is trying to extort money from my family by going up and down in Bray, hanging out with disreputable people, newspaper boys, she says, hanging out with newspaper boys, and the worst kinds of newspaper boys, she says, basically shouting all this about my husband. Stop her or else, basically.
Mary Travers then decides to sue Jane Wilde for libel. So
right.
it goes to court. High profile case, hugely gossiped about. The Wildes are a prominent family. And it became, a big public spectacle. And the whole thing was gossiped about.
And dragged everything out in the open. So William Wilde was a philanderer. He was cheating on his wife all the time, which one presumes she knew about. I mean, she knew about his 3 other children, which he had before they were married, but still. He was cheating on her all the time. And besides this, it seems that there was fairly scant evidence for the sexual assault against Mary Travers. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. But there was loads of evidence in favour of the libel case.
Okay.
So Mary had a really good libel case, and it didn't really matter whether anyone believed her about sexual assault anymore, because that wasn't what the trial was about, right? So what happens at the end is the jury is kind of disgusted with Mary Travers because they also believe that she's trying to extort them. But they say, but you do have a libel case and we actually can't even deny this. So they award her 1 farthing, a symbolic amount.
Symbolic victory.
She wins, but they don't give her any money. But basically everyone loses then because she doesn't get any money and the Wildes are scandalised and everything's just out kind of. All of William Wilde's private letters get published, for instance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just dragging things out. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So this Jane Wilde, Lady Wilde as she became after her husband was knighted. Let's talk about her.
Let's talk about her.
Fascinating figure. Went by the pen name Speranza.
Speranza, meaning hope, of course.
Hope, yeah.
Yes.
So she was really interesting. Quite eccentric. She was like a fake Italian. So she called herself Francesca. This wasn't her name. This just is something she invented. She invented a kind of a Italian backstory for herself. Her maiden name was Elgie, and she came up with this false
antecedents.
False family tree thing that she was descended from Dante Alighieri and this kind of stuff. And she had kind of these Italian affectations and stuff. It wasn't true. She just had really ordinary background.
Well, I mean, Elgie and Alighieri. I think that was a bit of a leap to make.
Yeah.
But, I mean, even if you did make the leap, it's like, I don't know if that means that you were in the actual direct descent of Dante, though. Yeah. But she was that kind of person. She was into this thing. She was very proud.
There's lots of commonalities between who she is and who her son would go on to become. She was more liberated than the times in which she lived. She was a famous social society figure, very funny, always making a huge scene, presenting herself dramatically. She was enormously tall, and she wore like outlandish dress and costumes, and her parties were absolutely famous. The Wildes' garden and their whole household, the 2 of them, it was all the who's who of Dublin of the day would go there for these huge parties. It was kind of like a salon, and she was a really committed nationalist. So this pen name Speranza was the name that she took up when she started submitting poems to nationalist newspapers like The Nation, and they didn't know who Speranza was at first. They didn't know it was a woman, and she was submitting these fiery nationalist poems, and then there's this famous sort of meeting that she staged between one of the editors that she'd been submitting her poems to. And he was invited into the living room, and she had this man greet him at first. And he said, "Are you the new, volcano of sedition?" And he said, "No." And he brought in this young woman, hugely tall. And that was how she deliberately staged it, to present herself with maximum drama and aplomb. That was the kind of lady who she was.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to Oscar in that she decided to be famous and just made it happen. Like, she knew exactly how to just be famous. Like, later on, as we'll see, Oscar just becomes famous just for being Oscar before he becomes famous as a literary figure.
Yes.
And that's basically what Speranza does as well, basically. She just becomes this figure. Also, one last thing to say about her personality. Not again, I mean, I'm reading into the plays again, but in basically
Lady
all of
Bracknell.
Oscar Wilde's plays,
Yeah.
there are these kind of Duchess characters, right? These
Saying
kind of-
outrageous
Yeah.
things, like terribly funny. Like, definite. You can, when you see those, if you've seen Oscar Wilde plays those characters, you're definitely seeing echoes of Lady
It
Wilde.
has to be his
Yeah.
mother, because it's always the same woman. Like it's the same kind of Duchess
Yeah.
character, more or less, in all of the plays. And he has to be thinking of that with this particular woman. But it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And he is also her, like they're both the same. They're very, very similar, and they really got each other, I think.
Yeah, he worshipped his mother. Well, he thought extremely highly of her. He took her very seriously. She was a real intellectual. Apparently, she used to read him Aeschylus in the original ancient Greek, and that was part of what led him into classics. She was really learned as well, like her husband, but kind of her own. The two of them were kind of powerhouses in their own way, and she very deliberately and proudly bred Irish nationalist politics into her two sons. Yeah.
Now, there is a context to this. So Speranza grew up in Wexford. Her childhood was in Wexford, so she was in the countryside. So when she was about 24, 25, we actually don't know what age she was, because she used to lie about her birthday.
She lied about. This is another thing that comes up in Wilde's plays as well, that he said something like, a woman should never be honest about her age. It looks so calculating.
Yes.
His mother was lied about her age outrageously, and he also went along with it, and he would later himself lie about his age, even on the stand.
On the stand.
The two of them were incorrigible. Anyway, she was born sometime around 1821.
Yeah, around 1821.
Yeah.
I think is it The Importance of Being Earnest? I think it's Lady Bracknell who says 35 is a wonderful age. There's so many women in London who remain so long after they've passed it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's born around the 1820s. By the time she's about 25, she's in the midst of the famine. She's surrounded by famine, and she decides to take this on as her literary cause célèbre, basically.
Okay.
So she becomes politically radicalized by the famine.
Wow.
And during the famine, it happens in real time. As she's seeing it around her, she starts writing political poetry about the famine, and basically doesn't stop. She just keeps going after that. So her first poetry are written in 1847. In the black year 47. There's loads of it. Listen, listeners, we might talk about it more in a half pint, because there's just too much to get around to, but do go and look up her poetry either way, because there's just so much of it, and I think there must be 30 or 40 poems written from 1847, all of which deal with the famine.
Wow.
But I'm just going to read you some of it to get a taste of it.
Yeah.
So this is one that she published called The Famine Year. We are wretches, famished, scorned, human tools to build your pride, but God will take vengeance for the souls for whom Christ died. Now is your hour of pleasure, bask ye in the world's caress, but our whitening bones against ye will rise as witnesses. From the cabins and the ditches in their charred, uncoffined masses, for the angel of the trumpet will know them as he passes, a ghastly spectral army, before the great God will stand, and arraign you as our murderers, the spoilers of our land.
Whoa.
It's
okay.
all like this.
Wow.
It is full-on vengeance, fiery vengeance stuff, with all of this imagery of the dead and the starving rising up in revolution against the British.
Wow.
So it's very warlike. I mean, this is one called The Enigma. It gives you more of an idea. It's a lot more rhythmical.
Okay.
And it actually does sound a little bit like some of Oscar Wilde's poetry when you listen to the beat of it.
Okay.
So these are just three stanzas. What? Are there no men in your fatherland to confront this tyrant's stormy glare, with a scorn as deep as the wrongs ye bear, with defiance as fierce as the oaths they swear, with vengeance as wild as the cries of despair that rise from your suffering fatherland? Are there no swords in your fatherland to smite down the proud insulting foe, with the strength of despair give blow for blow, till the blood of the baffled murderers flow on the trampled soil of your outraged land? Are your right arms weak in that land of slaves, that ye stand by your murdered brothers' graves, yet tremble like coward and crouching knaves to strike for freedom and fatherland? Oh, had you faith in your fatherland, in God, your cause, and your own right hand, you would go forth as saints to the holy fight, go in the strength of eternal right, go in the conquering Godhead's might, and save or avenge your fatherland.
Gosh, okay.
I mean, it is bellicose.
Yeah.
Very, very bellicose.
She wants violent. She's trying to instigate violent rebellion.
Yeah, openly.
Openly.
By
This
the
is
way-
why she was secretly writing on Esperanza. And it's hilarious that this fiery poetry was coming from, this woman who was this, society lady,
Yeah.
with kids and with this very respectable knighted doctor husband in the middle of Merrion Square.
Yeah, with their country pile and their archaeologist husband and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a bit weird. And really interestingly, a lot of these poems, because they were published in newspapers, they became like ballads in Dublin pubs. Because you can hear how that could be a song. For instance, that last one. It's very rhythmical.
People put it to tunes.
They put it to tunes and would sing it in pubs.
Wow.
And without knowing that, Lady Wilde is just down the road in Merrion Square.
Right.
Yeah.
She had written the rebel songs.
Yeah.
So she was famous. She was really famous in America. She was really famous in North America. This is kind of the time of the Fenians. Loads of Fenians were in the States, and there was lots of Fenian publishing, Irish nationalist publishing over there. Speranza, famous figure. So famous indeed that the first time Oscar Wilde would actually go to the US on like a lecture circuit, he was advertised as the son of Speranza. Her fame way preceded him.
So in 1848, she kind of pushed it a little bit too far. She wrote an article in The Nation, which was the nationalist newspaper. It was edited by Gavin Duffy. And I mean, I suppose poetry was one thing, but this was prose.
Okay.
And Speranza, Speranza appears in The Nation newspaper and writes this article where she just actually puts it in words. It says, go raise an army. Let's have an open revolution against Dublin Castle, she actually says.
Okay.
She says, "Oh, for 100,000 muskets glittering brightly in the light of heaven, and the monumental barricades stretching across each of our noble streets made desolate by England, circulating around that doomed castle made infamous by England, where the foreign tyrant has held his council of treason and iniquity against our people and our country for 700 years. Is there one man who thinks that Ireland has not been sufficiently degraded in her honour and her rights to justify her now in fiercely turning upon her oppressor? No! A man so infamous cannot tread the earth, or if he does, the voice of the coward is stifled in the clear, wild, ringing shout that leaps from hill to hill, that echoes from sea to sea, that peals from the lips of an uprisen nation. We shall be free." So...
Yeah.
This was too much.
Okay.
So the colonial authorities arrest the editor of The Nation over this for treason and sedition, and they shut the newspaper down.
Oh my goodness.
And he gets put on the stand in court, and again, Speranza is appearing in a court in Dublin, right? She takes a stand as belligerent as always and says, "I wrote the article."
I think, she even stood up from the audience.
Is that what she did? I'm not sure.
I think that's what you call it in a court. I don't know. The public gallery, she stood up and she said, "It was me who wrote it." Dramatically, this woman yelled it out. They were trying to, secure conviction against the editor. And of course, the jury would not convict. Jury wouldn't convict anyway because at that time, juries were habitually refusing to convict in Ireland charges against people for instigating it. There was a kind of a loyalty there on nationalist grounds, so it was really difficult to get juries to convict at the time. But this was part of it. But she had stood up from the gallery and said it was her. This dramatic moment, risking her own arrest and prosecution.
Loving every minute of it.
Loving it, of course.
But, but she wasn't officially there. So they just ignored her, and they were like, "Okay,
they
moving
ignored
on."
her. Yeah.
Which makes me think, I was thinking about this
Yeah.
in the context of Oscar going to prison. And I thought, Jesus, Speranza would have loved to go to prison. Like, she would have been built for that. She would have loved the suffering and the brutality of it all, like just taking it all the way. I think.
She would have made herself a martyr out of it.
Yeah, she would have loved being a martyr, yeah.
I think, biographers do look into these incidents where this was a victory for them, right? The guy didn't get convicted. The jury wouldn't convict him. They do look at these accounts and wonder whether this, can be looked to with, later trials with Oscar Wilde hoping for such a victory, but unfortunately didn't come. But we'll get to that.
Okay. So we better get to Oscar.
Yeah.
But, I'm glad we're talking about all this because something that Naomi and I were saying before we started recording this episode is that in a lot of biographies of Oscar Wilde, we have the Irish writer Oscar Wilde was born in Dublin in 1854, and then they moved straight to Oxford and London.
Exactly, yeah.
Or they say, his mother was a famous nationalist poet, and that's all that we get in.
Yes.
But he lived in Ireland until he was 22, was it? Or in his 20s anyway?
In his 20s at university.
Yeah. And he only lived until 46.
Right.
So half of his life was in Ireland.
True.
It's, this is not just a kind of like a backstory. This
Yeah.
is half his life, right?
That's true.
He's also just such an interesting character in Ireland. Just his context in Ireland is so fascinating. Anyway, so,
It's true,
yeah.
and you can't really understand him without understanding the nuances of this particular context.
Yeah.
Another nuance, of course, we mentioned briefly they're Protestants, the Protestant family.
Yes.
But yeah, obviously there's a fire of nationalism within this woman that she's admitted to her children as well. Such an interesting thing and kind of characteristic of that milieu, this moment of Gaelic revival. They're a lot of the most fervent people involved in the Gaelic revival and involved in fomenting national sentiment at that point were Protestants. Then they were from this Protestant kind of intellectual class, and women as well, like her. So interesting. And she was a little bit drawn to Catholicism at different times, like Oscar Wilde would be later. And there's a rumor, Oscar Wilde was completely officially Protestant, but there's a kind of an unconfirmed claim of Catholic baptism, somewhat similar to myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a priest who said that he baptized both Willie and Oscar into the Catholic Church.
I thought you were going to say there's a priest who says he baptized me.
Oh, we know, but there's a similar rumor about myself, you see, that can't be confirmed because my grandmother is no longer alive, but my Catholic grandmother may or may not have either baptized me herself or had me baptized as a Catholic, so we don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, we have similar rumors about ourselves.
I mean, the kitchen sink is one thing, but like rushing you into a church on your day off.
I wouldn't put it past her. I mean, she was pretty devout.
All
anyway,
right.
If it comes down to my immortal soul, Tim,
Well, I think you've got all your bases covered.
I've got all the bases covered. Yeah.
So, he was baptized in, speaking of which, he was baptized in St. Mark's Church on Pierce Street.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, you would know what to see, but it's so unremarkable. I used to live in a flat near there when I was in university. And I passed it every day, and there's no plaque or anything to say that Oscar Wilde was baptized there. But it's also like it's surrounded by a car park. It's, surrounded by ugly new developments. It's such an unremarkable church. But like when you take a look at it, you think, oh, well, that's something like, that should be a visitor center. Anyway, never mind.
Interesting.
So yes, definitely a Protestant. People said he was a Catholic. I think there seems to be a layer here because of his early school days.
Okay.
So one of the issues for Oscar was that he was brought up by like a governess until he was 9.
I think he had 2 governesses.
Did he? Oh, wow.
One German speaking, one French. So
Right.
they brought him up speaking those languages. Really interesting and useful for him later, particularly the French.
Very kind of typical upper class behavior, by the way, having governess.
Okay.
The aristocrats didn't go to school really; they were educated at home.
Huh.
But middle class people did because they didn't have enough money for a full-time governess for all their children. Or instructors. The instructors would come to you if you're an aristocrat, basically. That's why we get the emergence of public schools, by the way. What they called public schools in England in the 19th century. It was for middle-class people who couldn't afford instructors to come to their homes. So they called them these public schools, even though they were private and fee-paying. So he gets sent to one of these public schools in Enniskillen called Portora Royal School, which was... I mean, it was a very highbrow school for Protestant boys, but it's up in Enniskillen where a lot of people were Protestant and where a lot of normal people were Protestant, right? And where it doesn't have this kind of aristocratic flavour that it might on Merrion Square, to be high church, first of all, and to kind of use your status as part of the Protestant ascendancy as kind of a born elite, flapping around and being eccentric and stuff,
Yeah.
So like to be a nationalist and to be a Protestant in ascendancy Dublin was, maybe not that remarkable, but to be a Protestant and a nationalist in an Enniskillen secondary school just didn't make sense. Like people didn't know what to make of him, right? So I think maybe that's behind some of these kind of Catholic rumors. Like
They think there must be something Catholic in him there.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Portora. He starts to at first when he goes to Portora, everyone thinks Willie is the talent. Okay, that's his older brother. He seems like a good student. Oscar's just kind of like this dreamy kid. Doesn't show particular talent for much until he starts translating Greek.
Ooh.
When he starts producing translations from Greek, particularly Agamemnon, he's recognized as a big talent. Big, like in school. He begins to become a famous student like he would later. He basically emerges through his affinity for the classics, and he was very intellectually brilliant when it comes to studying particularly languages. He was an outstanding student.
Yeah, he's really, really smart.
He's incredibly smart. Yeah.
This is something that, yeah, I think we'll come back to this again, but it comes up again and again. It's something he doesn't really want people to know, or he doesn't assume it anyway. Yeah, no, I don't want to talk about that right now because there's more to say on that.
Yeah.
But he goes from Pretoria Royal School, he goes at the age of 17 to Trinity College Dublin.
Yeah.
So this was the logical next step. Basically, probably all his class went with him, right? Like this is where middle class children of professional Protestants went for university. Unless you were richer. If you had more money, you would go to England, right? So this was a very kind of middle class thing to do, not an aristocratic thing to do. But he goes into Trinity College Dublin where he meets Bram Stoker.
Yes, actually. Interesting story about them. They were love rivals.
Yes.
Yeah, Florence Balfour.
Balcombe.
One of them.
Yeah, Florence anyway.
Florence. Oscar's first love. He would write that the 2 years he spent courting her were like the sweetest of his life.
Yes.
But she didn't marry him in the end. She went for Bram Stoker.
2 years as well. I mean, just like what we were saying before, 2 years out of 46 years, that's not a small amount of time he spent courting Florence Balcombe / Balfour.
Yeah.
Yes, and Bram Stoker kind of stole her from him.
Yeah. Did she pick the right one? Maybe she did.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Dracula versus Dorian Gray. I guess. I don't know. Bram Stoker lived up the road. He was about 10 years. No, younger. He was about 6 years older than Oscar.
Okay. Lived in Clontarf, I think.
He was born in Clontarf.
And
he was living on Kildare Street at this point. But Kildare Street is just up the road from Marion Square. Yeah. So they would have known each other. These are two boys who grew up, a few doors down. So they must have known each other all their lives.
Interesting.
Right? Bram Stoker gets him into the College Historical Society, which was a debate. It's still there. A debate.
I think it's actually the Phil. It's the University Philosophical Society that he's in. Yeah.
Excuse me, that's it.
There's two rival debating societies. His one was the one that's known as the Phil.
Right.
Yeah.
So he, at the time, that would have been seen as a kind of mentorship, that Bram Stoker was the one who was kind of welcoming Oscar Wilde into University Society.
I think that's the thing. Like, it seems to be that you needed to be allowed in as a member at this time. Yeah.
Well, I guess they were a bit like gentlemen's clubs. Right.
Okay, that's what it was.
I mean, let's just be clear about what university was at this stage. When you went to university, you got a set of rooms, which was like a bedroom and a living room and a study, let's say, like 3 small rooms. And you would have a servant who would come and like bring you your breakfast and clean the place up for you. It was basically, it wasn't like being a student, it was much more comfortable than most people that I know live in their apartments. Okay. This was a nice way to live because it cost a lot of money. These were for people with money where if you weren't doing this, you would be in a situation where you had a servant doing all the stuff for you. So you had people coming in, putting on the fire for you in the morning and stuff. This is the kind of place that they were living in. And they acted like gentlemen. They dressed up like gentlemen. This was, I suppose, and it's still, to an extent, kind of is when you think about these elite universities. It's kind of a training ground for the middle class a bit. You just kind of get the codes instilled in you. That's what these clubs are really about. Right. It's kind of like training you to be a good middle class person, how to dress, how to present yourself, how to wear a tux. People love going to these like university balls where they're wearing tuxes, but really it is a bit of a training. That's where it comes from. But it was exactly the same at this point as well. And there would have been very few people in Trinity at this point. So a few hundred. That's it. Like a few hundred people in the university, all men.
They all knew each other.
And they all knew each other. Yeah.
You know who else was there?
Who else was there?
Edward Carson.
Edward Carson was also there. So, listeners, we're not going to spoil how he comes in. I mean, a lot of you probably know, but for the others, we won't spoil where Edward Carson comes into the story later. But Edward Carson, famously, as listeners to the Irish Passport podcast will know, was the big advocate for home rule during the War of Independence, basically, and during partition. He's the one who more or less made the partition of Ireland happen. Yeah.
So later, enormously prominent unionist politician, Edward Carson. But at this time, a Dublin boy like Oscar Wilde, like Bram Stoker. They're all from the same milieu. And supposedly they actually went back sometime because Edward Carson and Oscar Wilde reputedly were both on holidays in Dungarvan in Waterford as children and used to play together on the beach.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Oh, and he was also friends with George Moore.
Okay.
who was a big nationalist writer as well
Right.
during the Gaelic revival, because George Moore had a house, Moore Hall, which is near his house, his family's house out in Mayo. Beautiful old ruin actually out there now. But something else to take note of is that Oscar Wilde, now he's back in Dublin, right? So he's a 17-year-old, he's come back from Enniskillen to Dublin, surrounded by intellectuals and stuff in university, but then he would go home and like every evening, you know, he pushed open the door on Merrion Square and his house would be full of writers and artists and stuff that his mother had over. Basically,
the party would be in full swing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All the most famous intellectuals in Dublin would spend their evenings in his house,
Right.
like with his mother. So he was surrounded by the best of the best when it
Right.
came to intellect, I suppose.
And he already, when he was a student, he began to kind of become famous himself. He was, as we mentioned, extremely smart, and he excelled in classics in Trinity. He won the highest possible medal that you can win, which is this gold medal in Greek. And his professor took him on holidays to Greece because he was such a promising student, and they went to visit all of these ancient Greek sites. And he was very much encouraged to apply to go to Oxford, where they were sure he would get a scholarship, and he absolutely walked it. You know, he got a scholarship right away to go to Magdalen College in Oxford.
Magdalen College.
Yeah.
Now, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
I want to kind of stick on him being Irish here.
Yes.
Because one of the things he says in Oxford is, quote, "One of the things I forgot at Oxford was my Irish accent." I had actually been thinking about this before I saw that quote, because when I was looking at his life and thinking about Oscar Wilde, the Irishman,
Yes.
I was like, he must have had an Irish accent.
Yeah.
Like,
He'd
a
never
strong
been out
Irish
of
accent.
Ireland hardly until
He had never
was
been out of Ireland,
22
really.
or whatever.
Yeah. So, you know, exactly. He was like 22 when he left. And when we say Irish accent, maybe he didn't have an Irish accent like me, you know. Maybe he sounded Anglo-Irish, but maybe not, because I mean, I think we made an episode about the Irish accent a few years ago. And one of the people that we interviewed for that episode was an aristocrat. Who was it that you interviewed him? He was an aristocrat, an Anglo-Irish
He was
aristocrat anyway.
a rare surviving Anglo-Irish guy.
Yeah.
Who to us sounds like a British aristocrat.
Yeah.
But he said to them, they can tell instantly that I'm Irish.
Yes. So he had I suppose you could think about it a little bit like those Scottish accents that are like very, very posh, but they have like this hint of kind of Scottish in them.
Yeah.
So they sound quite English, but also kind of distinctively Scottish as well. There's an Irish version of that, basically.
Yeah, which is almost extinct.
It's almost extinct,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, he might have had that, but I don't think he did.
No,
because
I don't think he was upper class enough to have that.
Exactly, because
No.
when you look at literature, and especially of English literature describing people in Oscar Wilde's class at this point, they mock their accents so hard, and they write their accents phonetically, and it's all like, how's me leg, and you know, like it's full on basically.
Pray
like,
thee, Mr. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I tip
Where
my
me
cap to
thithers.
thee. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. It's full on stage Irish, like the way they do
Yeah.
it, even in Oscar Wilde's class.
Right.
So it was much more likely that he spoke a bit like that. He definitely had a brogue, I think.
He would have had a definitely distinct accent. Probably, I imagine, by the time he's at Trinity and he's like a student and he's living in those circumstances, he's probably got like a posh Trinity student accent, but an Irish one, which is probably not sounding posh to anyone outside of Ireland.
Yeah.
He's definitely not going to sound posh when he goes to Oxford. He's just going to sound Irish.
Right.
Yeah.
So listen, three moments in my brain
Yeah.
that I want to chart about this. First of all, that I had already been wondering about his accent.
Yeah.
Then I saw this quote from him. One of the things I forgot at Oxford was my Irish accent.
I can completely understand why he did that.
Of course, yeah, we'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah.
And the third thing is that I've heard him speak. Have you heard his recording of his voice?
No.
Oh, it's
Well, let's play
good.
it.
So I'm going to find it. I'm going to play it for you, and I'm going to play it for Naomi as well.
Okay.
It is so interesting. I'm going to play it right now. Hi listeners, just a post-production note here, because when I looked up the Oscar Wilde recording, I discovered that the British Library in the year 2000 conducted a study which pretty much exposes this recording as a fake. It seems that it was probably recorded in the 1960s. However, I decided to leave this segment in because for a really long time, everyone did believe that this was Oscar Wilde's voice. It's in documentaries, it's in studies. That's why I had already seen it. So in a strange way, it is part of the history that we have of Oscar Wilde. Also, even if we have to just imagine what Oscar Wilde's voice sounds like, this discussion is really interesting. But most importantly, it vindicates the suspicions that I have about the accent, which I mention in our discussion later on, which I suppose is a lesson to all of us to trust your intuition and that if things are too good to be true, maybe they aren't. Anyway, back to the show.
Wow.
Okay, so it's really bad quality, obviously,
This
because
is early days of recording technology.
early days of this existing.
Basically engraved in like bits of tin and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
It's amazing that we have it. So,
Yeah.
he died in 1900. This was made before 1900.
Yeah.
Just to put this in perspective. His voice, how would you describe what he sounds like? Could you compare him to
It's
someone?
hard to figure it out. But what I immediately put in mind of the old recordings of W.B. Yeats,
Mm-hmm.
who was his contemporary. W.B. Yeats had a very odd way of reading out poems. So he's reading it, first of all, he's reading out a poem. And second of all, he's reading the Ballad of Reading Jail. So this is from the very end of his life after he had spent his adult career in British society. He'd been to Oxford and stuff. So we're definitely we're hearing his later accent, which I'm sure we know evolved after being in Britain. For whatever reason, in the same way that when people do Shakespeare, they often put on upper class English accents. That's how people read out poetry. And don't ask me why. But yeah, that's definitely a little bit of what I hear there is an affected voice.
I think that's the thing. So I was fascinated to hear this because, and listen, all these thoughts didn't come at the same time. They all just converged. But when I heard that recording, and it was fascinating to hear it, the first thing that struck me was that it sounds wrong. It sounds too modern. The accent sounds too modern. It sounds like something a lot more that you would hear in it sounded a bit like Julie Andrews to me, right? Like kind of mid 20th century thing, like kind of maybe just post-war received pronunciation, something that you might hear today, something that you would hear in a period drama depicting the 19th century today. That's the way people talk when they're trying to sound like they're in a period drama today, right? But that's not actually how people talked back then.
No.
When you hear upper class people speaking, they speak really weirdly in the 19th century. There are other recordings of people. They don't speak with received pronunciation as we know it. It sounds a little bit similar, but not really. It's what it is. It's always infused with loads of local colloquial sounds because this is in an age before mass media. So even if they've all been to the same school or even if they're all in the same kind of social circles in London, they still retain these really distinct kind of local flavors in the way that they speak.
There's no mass standardization.
Yeah.
There's no vehicle of mass standardization for accents at this point. They can't be recorded.
Nobody can hear anyone that far away from them that often, right? So when you do hear other people speaking, and especially upper class accents, they are so weird. For instance, they don't aspirate their H's a lot.
Okay.
So they say aus.
Okay.
And av.
All right.
Instead of have and house.
Okay.
As you would think, right? I mean, the closest you can get to it, I think, is what the Royals sometimes sound a bit like that now. Is they don't sound like a period drama. The Royals don't speak they speak really weirdly. Wilde is speaking. It occurred to me when I thought of Julie Andrews. I was like, of course, he's speaking the English of the stage. He's not speaking like an aristocrat that he would have met in Oxford. He's speaking the English of the stage. And that's why Julie Andrews still speaks like that. Okay. That's why we recognize it today, because it survived. And
it's a performance.
It's a performance. Which made me think of him speaking like that in Oxford. That he, this was full on, that he's being the stage Irishman. Literally.
He literally is. Because he creates his own character of Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
Basically, he goes to live Oscar Wilde, and part of that is going to be how he speaks.
Yeah. So interesting. So interesting.
Yeah.
Now, so this, let's say, losing his accent.
Yeah.
I would put that kind of in this same pot as the character that he creates, who is a kind of layabout dandy. So Oscar Wilde is in Oxford now. He's crossed the Irish Sea. A new life awaits him.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be talking about in our next part, right?
There we are going to pick it up. We're going to stop for now.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to pick up with Oscar taking flight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We have so many notes, so we'll see how far we get in the next one. But I'm so excited to talk more about Oscar Wilde.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Slán, everyone.